On October 10th, 1994, a television program aired footage of what they claimed was of a man going through a real-life exorcism. At the end of the exorcism, the man was declared freed of any evil spirits. However, just a few years later, this man shot his wife and then killed himself. Later on in this video,
we found that you could break down a person's mind and reprogram it. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, they were like, yeah, we did it.
If you're new here, this is by far not a religious channel. We share reports on the mysterious and the unexplained, and we've reported on the possibility of demonic possession before. Our 9th video, in fact, featured a story of the Plot family. The youngest daughter, Heather, received a rather unusual gift on her 6th birthday. Her favorite Aunt Robin arrived with a homemade life-size doll made out of papier-mâché that looked uncannily similar to Heather. It was Heather's height, and it had Heather's facial features. Everyone in the family, of course, thought that, well, it was just bizarre. Everyone, that is, except for Heather. She thought that the doll was just amazing. Her best friend. She named it Susie Doll. Well, over the next few weeks, she spent more and more time with this doll and less time with her family. Then, for some strange reason, peculiar things began to happen whenever Susie Doll was in the room. And it wasn't dependent on whether or not Heather was there either. She could be out of the house, away at school, and these things would still happen. Then one evening, strange noises started coming from Heather's room, and the family rushed upstairs to find out what was happening. When her father burst through the door, he heard a man's voice coming out of his daughter's mouth.
"What are you looking at? Play with me."
We've done other reports on possessions as well, and if that subject intrigues you, please check out our playlist. You might find some of these videos interesting, and maybe you can share with us some insights as to what some of these reports mean. With all of the reports that we've done so far, however, we have never done one where the supposed possessed person becomes repossessed after an exorcism. So, in this video, we're not only going to be examining the idea of demonic possession, but we're also going to be exploring the possibility that a person who was once possessed and then freed of that possession can, and sometimes does, become possessed again. And to do this, we're going to be sharing the story of a man named Maurice Frenchy Theriault. He claimed that when he was very young, he expressly invited the devil into his life. His story is filled with twisted, demented events that began when he was just a child, and then over the years, several people have come forward stating that they've experienced strange things surrounding this man. Like, sometimes he was able to be in 2 places at once, and he could dream of events, and they would supposedly happen. We'll share his life story, his exorcism, and his relapse, culminating in the moment that he swallowed a bullet and then went to the next world. Then stick with us for our Fact or Fiction segment. There, I'll give you my opinion on this case. And then Amy is going to come on and she's going to talk about, now, check this out, the similarities between evil possessions and scientifically manufactured mind control. So, this story begins with some absolutely detestable things taking place in the barn. Some people believe that this story began when Maurice was 14 years old and he made that deal with the devil. But really, it began many years before that, pretty much from the time that he was born. He suffered indescribable abuse at the hands of his father. things so disgusting and so disturbing that we really cannot share them on this channel. But you do need to understand his life. So for you to get an idea, we'll quickly take you through this one event. In 1946, Maurice was 10 years old, and his father, Maxime, would often slip away to the barn for some mysterious reason. Well, one day, Maurice got curious, and he quietly snuck into the barn behind him.
When he saw what his father was doing, his jaw dropped and his eyes opened wide.
What in the world was his father doing with that animal? Well, Maurice wanted no part of this, so he quickly turned to leave, but in his haste, he accidentally made too much noise, and his father looked up.
"Maurice!"
His father's voice was like thunder, and he demanded that Maurice come closer. Now, we're not going to share any more of this scene with you. It's horrible. Suffice it to say that his father was doing something that he most certainly should not have been doing. And then he forced Maurice to do the same thing. I know, it's disgusting. And this part of the story is not overdone or exaggerated either. Far from it. We watered this down. This is the story. This is the type of abuse that Maurice had to go through as a child on a daily basis. And his father would threaten to kill him if he ever told anyone. So of course he stayed quiet. But as he grew older, his fear slowly turned to anger. And then one day, he called on the devil for help. When Maurice was about 15 years old, his father knocked him to the ground because Maurice couldn't get the tractor started fast enough.
"You no good bastard. Can't you even start a tractor?"
When Maurice hit the ground, his head slammed hard onto a rock and blood started gushing from the wound. And in that moment, something snapped. And as Maurice was getting up and his father was driving off into the distance, a wave of defiance, or perhaps evilness, washed over Maurice.
As Maurice stumbled toward the farmhouse, his hatred for his father consumed him. He turned around and said, "I'd rather work for the devil than work for you."
Well now, that statement made Maurice feel strong, so he said it again, and then again, and each time that he said it, it got louder, until finally it filled the air around him and completely saturated his mind. And looking back many years later, Maurice would say that that was really the moment that it all started. As a matter of fact, the very next day, he was able to lift things that he couldn't even get off the ground the day before. And it seemed as if he could puzzle out problems much faster than he ever had. He was stronger and he was smarter. Well, a few years later, he moved out, and then strange things began to happen around him. For example, whenever he would get angry, a crucifix on the wall would somehow begin to bleed. And then there were times when it looked as if he could be in two places at once. We'll continue the story in just a moment. But as Amy was sharing all of this with me, I couldn't help but to think back on some of our other possession videos, and my mind raced. I know that some of our viewers absolutely believe that demonic possession isn't only possible, but that it happens. But I have to be honest, I don't. I have a very difficult time thinking that some evil entity can take over a human body and control it. And I wondered, are there believers today who still think that this can happen? So Amy and I reached out to several religious leaders in the community, and one of them agreed to sit down with us.
My name is Roderick, and I've been teaching the Word of God for at least 30 years.
Roderick became a Christian at just 9 years old, and along with learning Scripture, he claims that he's had many personal experiences. is it possible that there really are people that can become possessed?
Yes. But a lot of times people don't want to admit it because it's a dark side that we just want to just go away. Just blink our eyes, it's not there.
So what exactly is a demonic possession?
When an evil spirit takes over and direct you to do things that you wouldn't normally do.
So how is it possible that an evil spirit can infiltrate a body and move their hands and fingers and without that person stopping them? Like, if an evil spirit were to try to possess me, I believe that I would be like, that's not happening.
You can say that's not happening. There are demonic spirits that will take control of the reality of life if you give way to it. It is possible.
Roderick went on to say that a person who was once possessed and then was excised can fall back into possession if he or she is not vigilant. As you can imagine, sitting down with Roderick did not change my mind, but his conviction was absolutely real. He genuinely believes in demonic possessions and that people can become repossessed after they've been freed from an evil spirit. Some of you may know that Amy and I actually interviewed a man who claims that he had been possessed for 50 years. We actually flew to Connecticut and sat down with this person face to face. During the interview, I told him that his story sounded absolutely fantastical. I also remember, however, that he said that as he was going through his exorcism, as the last of these demons were leaving his body, one of them told him that they'd be back. So we reached out to him to see what he had to say about the possibility of someone becoming repossessed.
My name is Joe Landry, and I was under demonic possession for 50 years.
Joe claims that he became possessed as a child, and not just by one demon, but many. So we asked him if he would retell the part of his story where he says that the demons told him they'd come back, and we asked him if he would share with us what he really believed about that.
When they exorcised the last of the demons out of me, one of them said, "We'll be back." I told the Archbishop this, and he told me, if they said it, they will come back. Do not think that you got them completely beat and that they won't try to come back. If they told you that that it's not over, they're coming back, then they're going to try to come back. And that's the truth.
Just like Roderick, Joe seemed absolutely genuine, both during our interview and when we met in person. And I'm not discounting his personal experience. I'll just let you make of it what you will. If you want to see the in-person interview, I believe it was Season 3, Episode 9, and I'll make sure that we leave a link at the end of this video. Going back to our story, Maurice married a woman named Christine. They had 3 kids, and then they divorced shortly after. Well, Christine moved to Maryland, and then at one point she got extremely sick, and she was in the hospital. And this is when things got really bizarre. Maurice's mother, Imelda, just hung up the phone, and then there was this knock at the door. When she opened the door, she saw Maurice.
Imelda's face turned white. "What are you doing here? I thought you were in Maryland visiting Christine."
Maurice said that he had the strangest sensation that he in fact was just in Maryland, which of course would have been impossible as it was hundreds of miles away. Imelda went on to tell him that just seconds before he had knocked on the door, she had been on the phone with Christine.
Why would she tell me that lie? Her aunt, Constance, also spoke to me and was telling me how sweet it was of you to come by.
Strange. I know. And there were other times where people thought that Maurice was in 2 places at once as well. Seemingly, he also had the ability to see real-life events while he was dreaming. For example, one night in 1982, he had a terrible nightmare about his father killing his mother. In the dream, he saw his mother waking up to a horrible odor.
Imelda opened her eyes and screamed. Maxine was leering down at her with an evil expression. His brow was so swollen that it was ape-like, and his lips were drawn back over his teeth, giving his jaw the look of a muzzle. His eyes were black, like two bottomless holes. "Good morning." The voice had come from Maxine, but it wasn't Maxine's voice. "Why are you talking like that?" Imelda asked. "We are not Maxine."
Now, I know how crazy this story sounds, especially this part right here, but we don't make up these reports. We just share them, and we do our very best to stick as closely as possible to the available research. Amy got her research for this one from several different sources. Many of the quotes in this video, like this one that we're sharing now, comes from this book, Satan's Harvest. This particular part can be found on page 107.
"What do you mean, we?" Imelda asked. "Who exactly are you?" "Astaroth, Dagon, Astarte, Moloch, Bel, Merodach, Beelzebub, Leviathan, Lucifer, Satan. Recognize us now. We are the devil."
This dream gets pretty explicit from there. Basically, her husband, acting like the devil, tormented her in all sorts of disgusting ways. And then he says that he was actually welcomed into the family by her husband's hatred for life and her son's statement that he would rather work for the devil. Then, just as she was saying the Lord's Prayer, he pulled out a gun and he shot her, but he missed. So he shot her again, and this time he hit her in the temple, and everything went black. But just before he woke up, there was a third gunshot in the darkness. Later on that day, someone shared a newspaper story with Maurice. Apparently, in real life, Imelda's daughter heard gunshots and then rushed into the room and found both of her parents dead. Somehow, it appeared as if Maurice had dreamed of this horrible nightmare while it was simultaneously happening in real life. And he had other nightmares as well. One seemingly somehow carved a message into his back. Over the years, Maurice was married twice, and then he eventually settled down with a lady named Nancy, and she was with him until the end. In 1983, he kept having this same reoccurring nightmare. In the nightmare, some evil entity was carving something into his back and laughing. Well, after experiencing this same dream for a while, one morning he woke up and got out of bed and then heard Nancy ask, "What is wrong with your back?"
Maurice turned his back to the full-length mirror and saw 4 words scratched out across his back, as if someone had taken a needle and etched a message.
As he stood there looking at those words in the mirror, he of course couldn't help but to think about that nightmare he kept having. And what did the words say? Well, the door is open. I know, ominous. If that's true, well then how did it happen? I mean, he obviously didn't scratch those words into his own back, right? That can't be done. And what did it mean, the door was open? Well, it couldn't be a coincidence that from that moment on, all sorts of strange things began to happen. There were several unexplained fires all across his farm. Strange, horrible odors would appear out of nowhere and then just linger in the air. And the family heard knockings and strange noises all over the house. And on several occasions, they heard footsteps when there was no one around, and heavy breathing from some invisible person. Strangely, some objects would just glow in the dark. And then something horrible began happening with Maurice's eyes. Whenever he would get upset, they'd bleed. And something inside of him kept trying to provoke him to do horrible things and be angry, but he fought it. Whatever he did, strangely, it was as if some evil force would try to kill him. Once, while he was hanging Christmas lights, something jerked the ladder out from underneath him, and then the string of lights somehow wrapped themselves around his neck and almost hanged him to death. On another occasion, some invisible force pushed him down a flight of stairs. And here's something strange. While all of this was happening, Maurice would often be found sitting alone in a trance, reciting phrases in some foreign language, something like Latin. Well, finally, the family had enough of it, and he and Nancy contacted a priest, and eventually an exorcism was performed. But, as we said earlier, either it didn't take or something went horribly wrong, because just a few years later, Maurice shot his wife and then shot himself. In our open, we shared a clip of a television program where Maurice was supposedly going through an exorcism. The exorcism was performed in May of 1985, and the program, which was produced by an Australian-based company and part of a TV series called The Extraordinary, aired on Monday, October 10th, 1994. And in between, after the exorcism, but before the show aired, Maurice killed himself. In the show, the commentator points to a single moment where he says that Maurice's face changes on camera. Right here, he claims that a gash suddenly appears on Maurice's face. Feel free to stop the video or back it up. After the exorcism, Maurice said that he felt better, and according to the family, all of those strange, mysterious things just stopped happening. Well, for a while. But at some point, as we shared in our open, something went horribly wrong. Maurice started getting angry again, and as a result, he and his wife separated, and she got a restraining order against him. Then, on Tuesday, November 3rd, 1992, Maurice snuck into the house with a shotgun and hid in the basement. A short while later, his wife came home, and they met in the kitchen. Well, she grabbed the gun, and then they struggled. He managed to smack her with the butt of the gun in the face, and this knocked her backward, and a moment later, she was outside running toward the street, and that's when he shot her. Shot right through the living room window. Glass went everywhere, and she went down. Somehow, however, the shot narrowly missed her torso, but it did rip off her arm, giving Maurice just enough time to go out into the front yard and grab her. Well, he dragged her back into the house and set her down, and then, now, check this out. He made her watch as he first struggled to get the barrel of the gun into his mouth, and then he pulled the trigger. During an interview on the television program, Nancy said that at that moment, she could only say one word. Amen. So, did a demon or demons really possess Maurice Theriault? Well, I already told you what I believe about demon possessions, and I'm sure you can guess what the scientific community thinks. Sean Michael Carroll is a theoretical physicist who has a PhD in astrophysics and astronomy. He obtained his doctorate from Harvard.
Theism says there's the physical world and there is God. Naturalism says there's only the natural world. There are no spirits, no deities, or anything else. There just is no such thing as God, or ghosts, or human souls that reside outside the body. Everything in existence belongs to the natural world and is accessible to science.
There were a number of odd things about this case. One of them was the fact that Maurice was suspected of repeatedly raping his stepdaughter, and the videotape of his exorcism actually helped him get off of the hook. After the district attorney got a look at that tape, the charges against him were ultimately dropped, and several people said that Maurice was just an angry old man who was faking it. His sister Donna actually came forward and said that Maurice absolutely was not possessed. She said that he was just a really good actor who was obsessed with the occult. And this case has been looked at by a lot of different people. Many of them actually do believe in demonic possession, but not all of them agree that Maurice was truly possessed. Amy looked into the similarities between evil demonic possessions and scientifically manufactured mind control. Like a tall chair?
I've been thinking about having
Because I'm getting old and decrepit?
you sit for the next season.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see with
Season
your personality.
5 coming up.
It's great.
So, what do you have for us today?
Well, I was thinking about the parallels between demonic possession and people who say they have undergone mind control. And of course, you know me, I love Marvel movies, and I couldn't help but think of the character Bucky, right? How he was such a great guy and Captain America's very best friend, and then he changed and did dastardly deeds.
Yeah.
And he acted possessed. Like if you look at his character,
Yeah.
he seems possessed.
Yeah.
And then we learn that it was mind control experiments, right? So I thought about mind control experiments throughout history. MK Ultra always comes to mind. I'm sure our viewers know about that one, right? Sidney Gottlieb was later dubbed the poisoner in chief. What a title, for the experiments they did in the 50s on mind control. And it was truly horrific. And then I thought about what was it, our first video, Project Mirage?
Yeah.
Oh my
The
gosh.
sister of MK Ultra, Project Mirage.
If you haven't seen it, just briefly, I'll go over it. So there was a man, Bosko Nedeljkovic, who came forward and said, look, I was an interpreter for the CIA, and I worked on some sketchy projects where we used mind control to convince people they had been visited or abducted by aliens.
Yeah.
And then I came across another one called the Tavistock Clinic. I had not heard about this before, but apparently it started in the 1920s, and they began experimenting on World War I veterans. And basically what the practitioner said was, we found that you could break down a person's mind and reprogram it. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, they were like, yeah, we did it. Now, of course, really hard pressed to find any documentation that proves, but there's a lot of evidence out there that they were doing some super sketchy stuff.
That makes me think of the Jason Bourne series.
Oh, yeah.
Right? They
I
take
forgot
this
about that.
guy, and it's so well played by Matt Damon, right? Because he looks so wholesome at times, and then he looks pretty tough. So they take this guy, they break him down, they get him to the place where he shoots this guy that he doesn't even know, just kind of bag over his head. It's like the graduation. It's like, how do you take a person that is just a normal person and break them down to the place where they will do something like that at your command?
Right. Well, what I've read from these experiments is one of the techniques they use is extreme stress. If you subject a person to extreme stress, things we probably can't even fathom for long enough.
So do you think that I personally have a hard time with demonic possessions, but if one believes in demonic possessions, do you think that that's part of what happens? The person gets subjected to a lot of stress, and then something from the outside can take over their mind?
Yeah, I think that could be what happens. I mean, if you can imagine your whole countenance being taken over by something just pure evil, I would call that extreme stress.
Yeah.
And if you talk to priests or those who say they've been under possession, and then you listen to the testimony of people who have survived these mind control experiments, the parallels are uncanny.
So maybe modern possessions this is crazy, and don't believe what I'm saying. I just throwing this out there. Modern possessions is just the government doing mind control on you.
Wow.
Do we have any tinfoil hats?
Maybe we should have worn some today.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's okay. So I got to ask you, like I always do, what about this case? Do you believe that Maurice Frenchy Theriault was actually possessed by a demonic spirit or several demonic spirits?
Okay, so when I first encountered this case, I'll be honest, I thought, okay, let's look at the evidence. His father was extremely abusive. We didn't include even a small smattering of the things that happened to Maurice as a child.
Yeah.
his father ended up killing, his mother and then ending his own life.
Yeah.
And then you have what Maurice did at the end of the story you shared. And
Similarity
I thought,
there to
yeah,
his
the
parents.
parallels. And we are certainly on this channel not saying that when people do bad things, it's demonic possession or
No.
mind control. Nope, not trying to give
Personal responsibility.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not trying to give anybody any excuses. So I stopped there and I thought, okay, let's look at what other people said. And I looked at quotes from other people in the family, neighbors that would come over, police officers that gave statements saying they saw these strange things.
Yeah,
and I
that's
thought,
right.
I do think there was something to him having a possession or encountering a demon. Not really sure, but I think it was highly fueled by his abusive experiences
Yeah.
and temper.
Yeah. Do you think like something like that makes a person more susceptible to demonic spirits or something like that?
Right.
Or whatever that is.
Yeah, I'm no expert, but we talked to several people who said, yes, if you are already in a state of turmoil, that makes it much easier to have a dark entity, a demon, whatever you want to call it, come in and really run your life.
Yeah. So you lean more to the fact that you think that there was something otherworldly involved somehow.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again.
You're welcome.
If you're brand new here and you've watched all the way to this point, please don't think that I dismiss every unexplainable thing that we share, because I don't. Perhaps with this one, I have a bias. I really can't imagine some evil spirit possessing me, especially if it might mean that I could hurt Amy. Earlier in this report, I said that we would share a link to the episode where we interviewed Joe. That was a pretty interesting case because in it, we examined one of the most haunted houses in American history. This haunting took place in the 1970s, and unexplainable things were actually reported by police officers who went on record and said that they saw impossible things like the refrigerator floating. It is an extremely interesting case, and if you'd like to see it, it's here.
Speaking of coffee,
yes.
Did you know that the caffeine extracted from coffee beans is actually ground up and sold to food and drug companies?
No.
True story.
And can they go to Buy Me a Coffee and support us?
That would be great.